Hi. Just tidying up. You know, fighting depression and fighting villains is really kind of the same thing when you think about it. I mean, it's all about your strength, your will, and it helps if you have the right tools.
Like flimsy tortured analogies, you mean?
When it comes to fighting depression, the most obvious tools to use would be drugs, but where do you even start?
Oh, I know a guy. Hangs around outside school on the other side of town.
See, there are loads of different kinds of antidepressant and it can get confusing. Sometimes your doctor will put you on one that doesn't work just so he knows what ones might work. It can get a bit complicated, but the most popularly prescribed at the moment are SSRIs, and that's because they normally have fewer side effects than other drugs, and in the result of an overdose they'll be less critical. You'll probably even recognise their brand names: Prozac, citalopram, Seroxat, Lustrol.
I think I had a henchman called Seroxat once.
SSRIs are normally the first prescription for especially shorter or less severe bouts of depression, but they're not always 100% effective at catching the anxiety symptoms, so you might get switched over to SNRIs. They're basically the same, but the SNRIs were designed to be more effective. Whether they are or not is kind of hard to tell for certain, but they do have cooler names, things like Cymbalta or Yentrive or Effexor.
Okay, now I know I had a henchman called Effexor.
There's a whole ton of serotonin-based antidepressants, and that's because it's a mood-altering hormone, and changing how your brain receives or produces it is the quickest way to find out how severe your depression is. So doctors tend to use it to test the waters. Like I used to be on citalopram, which was an SSRI, but I was still freaking out, so they put me on mirtazapine instead.
Ugh, marzipan, I hate that stuff.
What?
Marzipan, it's disgusting.
Mirtazapine, which is actually a tetracyclic, I'm getting ahead of myself. You see, TCA is an older family of drugs. They're not usually prescribed as first-line treatment because they have more nasty side effects than the others, and they're worse in the case of an overdose. But if it's something long-term and it's really not going away, then TCA might be your best bet, or his baby sister, TCA. TCA and TCA, they're kind of the heavy backup artillery you bring in when you find out that changing the serotonin levels isn't doing dick. It's kind of like finding that the toaster's broken, so no matter how high you turn the knob, it's just not working, so you use the grill instead.
First cheese, then petrol?
There is another type of drug, the MAOI. Until recently, to continue the toast analogy, it's kind of been seen as like finding out the grill doesn't work either, so you burn the house down.
Now it's bloody toast. No more similes, I'm begging you.
Anyway, so MAOIs, not usually prescribed because they tend to give you really high blood pressure, which affects what you can and can't eat and what other drugs you can take, and they have a lot of other side effects. But if you've got severe depression that's not going anywhere and that isn't being touched by the other drugs, and you have psychiatrist supervision, then you might want to give it a shot.
Idiot. What about over-the-counter drugs? They can get all this information from a pharmacist.
Ignore him. You see, one person's reaction to a drug can be completely different to someone else's, and the last thing you want is to go about messing with brain chemistry when you don't understand it. So speak to a doctor first is always my advice. If you are still worried about drugs, then I will talk to you next time about alternative therapies, talking therapies and things like that. But remember, you are the master of your own mental health, even if it doesn't feel like it. So don't worry, there is no shame in asking for help. Like how I'm going to ask the police for help in locking up this loser. As soon as I figure out how I'm going to get him to the station.